Hi, I'm Heather from Heather Handmade, and today I'm going to teach you how to make a really easy DIY swimsuit cover-up. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel for lots of fun sewing ideas. I'm going to be using this really pretty soft gauze-like fabric. It's really lightweight. You can kind of, see through it. It's a light blue. It's 100% cotton, which is great for water absorption, and it dries quick. For me, using a swimsuit cover-up isn't really about covering up because I don't mind walking around in my swimsuit. It's usually because I'm getting to the point where I might be getting sunburned, and so I like to throw something on to protect my shoulders. So the style I'm going to be making will have a little bit of shoulder coverage, and it will go to about mid-thigh. I'm also going to be adding some little lace trim. This is kind of like a almost like a crocheted trim. You can often find interesting trims at the thrift store. The first thing you need to do is measure your body. So what I'm going to do is, you're going to measure your bust, and it's okay if it's not perfectly accurate because this cover-up will be a little bit loose, but you're going to measure your bust and see what that width is. Then you're going to multiply that measurement by 0.75, and that will give you the front section and the back section of the top, and then you're going to multiply just the front or just the back by 2, and that will be the gathered skirt portion, but I'm going to show you as we cut it out so it makes a little bit more sense. So the first thing we're going to do is cut the rectangles that will be for the bodice, and then we will cut the gathered skirt portion. So I'm going to straighten this grain line at the top by ripping it. So I'm going to cut rectangles. So the length of the rectangle will be your back to waist length, and then the width will be that measurement, your measurement of your bust times 0.75. So you're going to have two rectangles. So you're going to have your length and then that 0.75 width, and you're going to have two of those rectangles. I have one rectangle that's this wide. Now I need to cut this big long rectangle in half. So now I have, these are the two bodice rectangles, but what we're actually going to do is cut one of these in half to be the front so that we have a center front opening. So we're going to cut this one once more. Now we're going to cut the skirt pieces, and I want my skirt to be gathered 2:1 to my bodice. So I'm going to use the full width of the fabric, and I'm going to do that twice so that I can get a really gathered skirt. I want my skirt to be 18 inches long. Here I have two long rectangles. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to pin the bodice together. So I have, this is my back bodice piece, and then I have my two front pieces. We're going to sew halfway up here and then leave a hole for the arm, and then we're going to sew the shoulders across the top. I'm going to make a little bit of a circle up here for the neckline. So I have my sides lined up. And I'm just going to cut a little circle. I'm folding this so I can get it equal on both sides. And I'm really just kind of cutting kind of a circle shape. And because I don't want to have a point up here at the front, I'm going to cut down the center front at an angle and kind of blend it into that center front like that. So it's a little more, it's kind of a smoother transition from the front to the neckline. So now I'm going to pin my shoulder pieces together and halfway up the side of the bodice, and I am going to sew these with a French seam, which means I'm going to sew the seam first at 1/4 of an inch and trim it down to 1/8, and then I'm going to flip it right side out and sew that seam again so that all of the raw edges will be enclosed. I'll show you when I'm at the sewing machine what I mean, and I actually have another video that talks about it, so you can check out that video to learn about it too. Sew all these seams with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to trim where I sewed down to 1/8 of an inch. Now that I have trimmed that, I'm going to turn the bodice to the other side. And I'm going to sew again with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm going to sew over those seams. So this is a seam right here, and that raw edge, that 1/8 edge, is right in there. So when I sew this, all of those raw edges will be enclosed. Now with the skirt pieces, I want to leave an opening on the front, but then I want to combine this into one piece of fabric. So I am going to sew one short edge together, so something like this. So I'm going to pin this, and this one I am not going to do a French seam because this is going to be the center back of the skirt. This is actually the selvage of the fabric, and so it's not going to fray. I'm just going to press it open and leave this seam unfinished because the selvage will not fray. When I sewed this French seam here, I clipped a little bit of this into the seam allowance right here. So when I turn this right side out, so here's the armhole, and since I clipped that seam allowance, I'm going to be able to turn it over once and add the lace on top. So here is the bodice that is mostly finished except for the lace edge. But first, before we add the lace, we're going to put the skirt onto the bottom of the bodice. So here is my skirt, and we're gonna do right sides together. So I'm matching up the right side of the bodice with the right side of the skirt. This is the center back. And then I'm going to match up the center front. Now I'm going to gather the skirt so that it fits the bodice. Now we're going to sew this seam at 1/2 inch and with a straight stitch. Now that this seam has been sewn, I decided to serge this one. We are going to finish all the edges with this lace. So finish the edges, what I mean is I'm going to fold all of the raw edges to the outside about 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to come along with this lace and sew it on top like this. So I will sew on this side and I will sew on this side to keep it in place, and it will give all the edges a nice look, but then it will also finish all the edges so you don't have to do any hemming. And that is how you make a really fun and easy DIY swimsuit cover-up. The lace and the gathers make it really feminine, but the fabric is thin and soft so that it drapes well over your swimming suit. It would work great with prints or solids. There's no hemming involved, and it's just a little bit of sewing some seams, some gathering, and then adding lace to the edges.